All right, well, I'm excited to invite our guest to speak. I'm going to introduce him. One moment here. Uh, we are in a time when there's a lot of stress around elections and politics. So we thought that our guest, Abdirahman, and I should have asked you before how to say your last name correctly. Is it Kariye?
Kariye. Yours.
Kariya. Okay, Abdirahman Kariya. He's local here from Minnesota. He's an imam, as he's also a humanitarian and an educator. His educational background is from Highline College and also from Al Azhar University. So he's studied in both of those places for his undergraduate. And right now he's studying for a master's degree at the Islamic University of Minnesota. I bet most of you didn't even know there was one of those. And and his in his daytime job, he serves as CEO for Human Development Fund. And this is an international NGO. He also works as the Imam and Community Education Director at Dar al Farouk Center. And I believe you're involved with Isaiah, is that correct? Yeah,
Correct.
that's we brought you in from the Isaiah Network, the Isaiah folk that are working with faith and justice and things like this. So he comes to us from that door, and he works a lot with the with elections in the faith community. So we're so excited to speak with you today. Thank you. Please go right ahead.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And thank you, Dr. Gray, for the kind and wonderful introduction. It is an honor to be amongst faith leaders from different backgrounds, walk of life. Um, uh, and I don't know if all of you are from Minnesota or coming from all over the country, but it is a pleasure to have uh, members of our community that are working together, collaborating, sharing their values and their passion for seeing a better world through our faith, our teachings, our moral grounding, the framework that we use to do the work that we do. So just I know that we had a little bit of introduction and to who I am, so I will get a little bit personal. And I know this is a safe space for faith leaders for us to be a little bit more vulnerable and talk about, especially we're going to be talking about emotions. So we'll get into that as well. But just from what is my moral grounding, what is my what I use to kind of as a catalyst for the actions and the things that I do. And I always remember the the teaching in our faith, in our Islamic teaching, is that faith, which sometimes we call iman, is considered one of the components that is key to, one living a life of fulfillment, right? So the term iman or faith that you would generally associate what you believe, what you think, what you hold dearly onto in your heart is always connected to the actions. And that is why our Prophet, peace be upon him, said, faith and good actions are partner. One is considered incomplete without the other. Like the faith is a catalyst for the good actions that we do. And the reason I talk about this is because the Prophet, peace be upon him, in one narration, he told us how actions are connected to the faith that we have. He said, whoever among you sees wrong, sees injustice, sees something wrong being done in front of them, or and you have the ability to change that with your hand, then one should do so. And then if one cannot do it with their hand, then you should do it with your mouth, with your verbalize that your faith teaches you to speak against it. And then the third component is at the very minimum, right? Like, when injustice happens, when something wrong is being done, when oppression is happening, your heart dislikes that. because the faith that you have in God, in the teachings of the messengers of God, is that you cannot accept this. And at the very minimum, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, you would at least hate it in your heart. And he said, this is the lowest form of faith, yet it's still a form of acknowledging, is an action of the heart. And one is an action of the tongue, one is the action of the limbs. And I think, in a world we're living in today, where we see injustice all over the world, and Muslims are, you know, and people of other faith are wondering how we can, you know, uh, not allow these injustices to divide us, but unite us in a common good to eradicate injustice, eradicate oppression, eradicate the wrongdoing against other fellow human beings. This is a very important fundamental of who we are as faith leaders. And time and again, we find consistently that faith leaders are the center point, the gravitational pull for the societies, communities, where people come around in moment of chaos, in moment of uncertainty, in moment of crisis. We are the focal point to address people, to ease their mind. And sometimes we also get burnt out in the process of doing that. And we get tired and we feel like, oh my God, I'm running from place to place, person to person, and you're just giving and giving and giving, and then you forget about yourself. So um, that is why this type of grounding, this type of networking is so important for all of us to be able to engage with one another, to take principles from one another to ground each other. Um, I I personally, in my life, my work of life, and in the area of advocacy work, and um, you know helping others out in this space, I experienced myself a very interesting setback in my personal life, where during the rise of Islamophobia in the US, where Muslims were targeted, and still the rise of Islamophobia is still there today. We find it in the attacks on places of worship, whether it's a mosque, a synagogue, or a church. We see that places of worship are targeted. We see that minorities are targeted. We see that Islamophobia is also on the rise. And I say this, that I experienced Islamophobia personally myself, and the only way sometimes to stand against injustice is that you have to be the one that takes action. And personally, about several years ago, nearly for about 5 years ago, I I personally used to travel a lot for conventions, conferences, lectures, and workshops all across the country. And I had a great amount of difficulty flying and getting on a flight, to the extent that I was denied boarding. I was placed on secondary screening. I was held for hours on end for questioning. And I thought that this is an acceptable way to live. I accepted it as a way of this is just normal. I'm a Muslim. I deserve this. I never spoke out against it, never used my faith to ground me and to teach me that I have to be the one that takes action in order for change to come about. And even in the Quranic teaching, we find that indeed God does not change the condition of people until they change that which is within themselves. So change has to come from yourself first. I didn't believe that I could build the that level of change for myself to build and seek out my own justice. So I lived under the difficulties of being targeted as a Muslim, traveling all across the country, interrogated and questioned because of my faith. And when I had enough of it, I decided to seek, and to build power and to respond back and to speak publicly about it and bring my case public. It was a very vulnerable thing to do, because as a public figure, as Imam, people would say, "What is wrong with you? Why are you being always stopped?" And I think because of me speaking out, many others who didn't have even the courage to speak out we're encouraged to seek out also justice. And we find this as a common theme that yes, Islamophobia is there, and Islamophobia or any other phobia that targets minorities does not end because we sit on the sidelines and we allow this to just go on, and somehow it's going to end by, a miraculous divine intervention. No, but this will come because we are the people that are supposed to be the agents of change, and we are the ones stepping into place and speaking against these things. And I'm so thankful that this experience allowed me to really understand the value of what I can do in society. And as a faith leader, sometimes you don't get to see that until it happens to you, until you become, you see that injustice and oppression against you. And then you realize that your faith should be your grounding place. It is the place where you drive action through. And I always say that if you have a way, if you can respond, then you have a responsibility. You know, all of us have that. All of us have an obligation. And I know today, as someone who works in the humanitarian sector, as someone who focuses on global crisis as well, and looking at the impact of war around the world and the impact that it has on individual lives, on those children that are impacted because of these wars that are happening all over the world. It is important for us as people of faith, people who lead our community, who lead our congregations, that we are the agents of change. We allow the space for change to happen. We are the supporters of change, whether it's if we can physically help, if we can verbally help, or even at the very minimum, that we do not like to see oppression anywhere around us. That we are responding and standing for that level of justice. And the reason I say this because the Muslims of America today, the American Muslim community, and many others who are allies, feel, that their voices are not being heard in the political discourse, that they are not being given a chance to their issues when it talks about war, how we fund proxy wars all over the world. And we bring out these situations publicly to elected officials, to those who represent our voices in Congress, in the Senate, in the White House. And we try to hold accountable those who represent us, all of us, that this is a very interesting election, season that we're going to be experiencing this year. Many have given up hope on those that we have brought them to the seat that they're in today. And we don't know what those who are campaigning today, and if I can be frank, all of you are faith leaders, you are in the political discourse, all of you are aware of what's happening around the world, nothing to be vague about. We have the rise of Trump, who is, potentially the next president of this country, and a very likely scenario. And we understand the implications of a presidency with Trump for the Muslims and the minorities of our community and Black and brown communities, how they're going to be impacted by a Trump presidency. What could that mean? But on the other hand, also our our Muslim American community is also frustrated that those who we thought were our allies would understand that when their families are being killed in Gaza, and being massacred, that we would have a voice to be heard. So I think it's a moment of confusion. This year is going to be the discourses we'll have in our congregation will be very interesting. And I know all of you are wondering the same. And I want to open that discussion for those of you who are willing to share your thoughts and how you see things, and how we can also be part of that agency of change, but also at the forefront, because faith is what is guiding all of us. And hopefully that faith is not just something that we say or just hold on to in belief, but it's also translated into actions. I'll end with that, and I'll give it back to Dr. Gray after these words. Thank
I'm
you.
going to ask you a question, if you don't mind, because I think it's a question that I talk to a lot of people, and I'm really curious about it, which is the concept of this division of Trump and Biden, and at least I don't know what it's called, what's happening in other other faith communities. The Muslim community, there's a real push to dump Biden, and there's my family community, like my mom and these guys are panicked when they hear things like that. And so like coming from that place of voting and all of this, I don't even know what to do as far as like how to respond to people. And everyone can vote for whoever they want to, but what do I say to them? I don't know. Can you address that? I don't have a clear question. I'm sorry, but it's
Yeah.
just messy. Yeah.
And I completely agree with you. It is very messy, because we know what a Trump presidency is, and the impact and implication that it has on all of us. We lived through it for 4 years, and it was a nightmare, those 4 years. Um, uh, and maybe, I think there is a sense of frustration at the current administration. In particular, Muslim Americans community feels that Joe Biden has ignored the plea of the American Muslim community, as well as many others who wanted an end on this war, that this we should stop the killing and we should end the war, get a ceasefire. It was very for months that has been asked. And I think many of the American Muslim community, the dialogue or the discussion is now,
Oh,
you know, during the primaries, we said we will go
oh,
uncommitted. Muslim
Your
community as
audio
well
cut
as
out for a
many
second.
others. Can you hear me?
yeah, your audio cut out for a second, but you're back. You're fine.
Okay. So I was saying that during the primary election, many of the American Muslim community decided to go uncommitted during the primaries. And in Minnesota, we had a great turnout where almost about 20% of the primary voters decided to vote uncommitted. And that was just to, say that, hey, we have always voted with this party line because we align, in terms of politics. We have similar viewpoints on providing a better quality of life here, and we understand we're more accepted here. So they said we're not abandoning this platform. We're just saying we're uncommitted, and we're sending a powerful message that we need a ceasefire and we need this to stop. Um, and that was supposed to be a telling part to the Biden administration to stop this. And now we're coming to the general election. I believe now we have the first debate in 2 days between Biden and Trump. And we know that this is gearing up to be a national general election. And the question comes back and say, okay, the American Muslim community and many others have been voting with Democrats for a long time. We are also in key swing states, such as Michigan and Wisconsin, and some of these places where you really, in Georgia, obviously, where you need a Muslim voter bloc to still deliver some of those key wins for any, especially the Democratic Party. And we're having now there, and there's two really camps right now, Dr. Gray, on this matter. I don't know where the balloons are coming from, but but there are two really important camps in the election this cycle this year. Number one, we have one camp that is totally like abandoned Biden as a punitive measure because he didn't listen to our plea for the last 6, 7 months. And you can't just come during election and just ask for our votes. You're not going to take our votes for granted. So that's one camp that exists. The other camp that exists is like, well, let's wait and see if we get a ceasefire before the election. And maybe if we get something really, permanent and serious, then we can rally our Muslim community to still come out and vote because he's the better option of a Donald Trump presidency. And it is a third camp that I will mention that also views and says that, there's a third party candidate that we should look for. And we know third, party candidates rarely get even on the ballot, let alone, on a general election, get traction. So this is just the reality of the politics that we deal with. So I'll give it back to you.
Yeah, thank you. So I see your hand, Whitney, but Rabbi Adam sent me a private message. He has a comment. I'd love to hear what you say first. He was before your hand, Whitney, so I'll give it to Rabbi Adam first.
So I just wanted to say, Abdirahman, I so appreciate your being here and sharing in a really beautiful way what your community is reflecting on and thinking about. And this is what I long for, is places where we can have these kinds of conversations and listen to each other. It's such a reality that well, we all are feeling such unbelievable pain at this moment. And and we're all feeling like our hands are tied behind our backs in many ways of what to do. But just staying in this community and listening to each other is, I think, obviously what I pray we can do. And my only 2 cents that I want to, I guess, add for myself is just my fear of this moment because of what is going on, just the implications. I mean, it's just awful on so many levels. But we're not supposed to talk about 2 things, religion and politics, and here we are. But I'm just going to be also just straightforward too. If Trump is elected, it's not just a reaction to the pain of what's going on or not getting the responses one wants. I think it's the undoing of America and the American experiment. And I think it's not just something that we could then, all right, the next 4-year cycle, I think we won't have another 4-year cycle after that. I'm not trying to be histrionic. I'm trying to read the tea leaves, and I think I'm not alone in that. So whatever we can do to figure out how we keep America America at this time, as we try to work with passion what we need to do to affect the change we want to see. That's my prayer.
It's a real fear. It's a real fear. All right, thanks everyone. And I want to echo what Rabbi Adams said earlier about this is really unusual to be able to have these conversations. And thank you everyone for being brave and in a brave space. Thank you, Abdirahman. Your camera went away, so maybe you had something else to do. So I don't know if you can hear me or not, but thank you for coming here and starting us off on this conversation. And we really appreciate you.